Almost precisely at what most species on the GA authoritative considered to be midnight, an automated distress signal followed by a less automated, way more distress signal had been intercepted by one of the frontier worlds and was subsequently forwarded to the quadrant's official base of operations, which of course meant that all the council members had to be roused from their sleep and escorted to the council room as quickly as possible. This, as you might expect, led to certain interesting developments. For one, either Atleon was seeing double or both the Atnian monarch as well as his body double had arrived at the meeting, not knowing that the other would attend as well. Of course, the young monarch had a simple explanation, for you see this look-alike was merely an evil clone, who, as evil clones are often known to do, immediately agreed with his accuser, called himself a dastardly rascal before letting himself get handcuffed and carried out of the room. Atleon had almost found it funny if not for a third Hirunas to walk in not 2 minutes later. Not wanting to get drawn into even more courtly intrigue, the Grand Vizier began to mentally recite his talking points, trying to ignore the other panicked heads of state. Most of all his political rival, the esteeming piece of shit Grand Priest Ediyun, whereas Atleon could be described as rather stout and fair, perhaps a tiny bit opportunistic. His co-ruler Ediyun was his polar opposite. Lanky, conniving, and if Atleon knew what a snake was, he'd probably liken and wish to feed him to one. One might ponder why Ediyun hadn't been ousted from his post as a religious figurehead ages ago on the grounds of laziness and a general lack of respect. After all, he practically sleeps through the entire workday, only to then spend the night attending lavish parties and enjoying himself. At first, one might blame corruption or nepotism, accusations that wouldn't be entirely without merit. But more so than anything else, Ediyun's just a very annoying and dangerous combination of charismatic, clever, and ruthless. Whatever work the theocracy's diplomats and politicians might get done during the day, Ediyun would easily surpass them at night at said celebratory events. The following day, he'd merely need to point out who he'd talked to the night before, and then the only thing that the theocracy's diplomats would need to do is make things official with a polite nod and a scribble. It was a fairly good system, at least as long as they could remember to warn the interns against waking him up prematurely. Otherwise, he'd oversleep, and no one wanted to have to pay him overtime. Having had enough of everyone's insistent bickering and convoluted accusations, Atleon finally couldn't take it anymore and yelled for everyone to be quiet already. Everyone undoubtedly already knew what had happened. We're all stressed and tired, so then why the hell do these childish sycophants feel the need to further add fuel to the proverbial fire? Atleon thought to himself angrily. That wasn't me. That was the gods. He stammered nervously after almost losing his cool there for a second. With everyone finally quiet, Atleon officially started the emergency council meeting. Honored members of the council, guests to this humble station, and representatives of the people's interests. Today, fate has once again dealt us a crippling blow. Atleon continued to inform the rest of the council about the concerning news regarding the Inowean's oh-so-high-tech ship that was no doubt already in the hands of the Dark Goddess. This is a travesty. A tragedy. We must send a fleet of those new warships. They're not ready yet, and might not even be all that effective against the Gaians. We shouldn't provoke them. No, hide. We should just cut off all contact and pray they won't find us. That's ridiculous. How long do you think we'd be able to keep that up? Once again, fueled by fear and desperation, the council members began to argue and bicker among themselves. Or at least they did until a shrill, high-pitched voice stood out above the rest. Maybe things need not be so difficult. The second representative of the Analys's seat of power remarked. Perhaps these Gaians have a very different part to play in the galaxy's future affairs other than what might appear most evident. Perhaps you've all been looking at things all wrong. What the hell are you on about this time, Ediyun? Atleon asked dryly. Oh come, do you all seriously not see the opportunity that's right in front of us? Over the last few millennia, some of our constituents have grown, difficult, displeased with the way of the world. And now, thanks to these Gaians, dissenting voices have made themselves known, all while those still loyal have been invigorated with renewed fervor and zealous admiration towards us and the prestigious gods we serve. These Gaians have reminded the universe why we're here, why we, the gods' representatives, were chosen. Those who were progressively losing their way and faith in our rule have in one swift motion seen the error of their ways and returned to the flock, while those too far gone to be saved are practically on the cusp of becoming a cautionary tale. Don't you all see? Are you all blind? They're our counterbalance, yet so far behind technologically. We can use that, and more importantly, we can use them. Which is why I've taken the liberty of intercepting and dealing with any and all troublesome information that might otherwise find its way past the quadrant's borders. Admittedly, I can't entirely stop the rumor mill, but I can at least manipulate how fast it spins. In fact, I'd wager I'm pretty adept at dampening revolutions if I say so myself. He mused ominously while staring at the other representatives with an expression of childlike glee plastered on his bonny visage. Are you seriously suggesting we use the dark goddess children to keep our people in line? One of the Cuisinian senators asked incredulously. Well, why not? We've technically been doing it since forever already. Telling our children to behave or the horned one will find them. Telling non-believers to start praying or they'll get sent to the world of the dark goddess. Only difference now is that we've got coordinates and some rather invigorating visual stimulants to accompany these life lessons we wish to impart onto our flock. Look, just send a couple PKVs, peacekeeping vessels, to go retrieve whatever still remains of the subtlety, and I'll do the rest. Eventually, whenever I feel like it, that is. The archpriest said mid-yawn. No, we must send an entire fleet and strike back. They can't think we're weak and cowardly, one of the senators yelled. First and foremost, we must send a theocratic vessel to guide the souls of the subtlety's crew to the afterlife. What if they left the ship's wreck after slaughtering the crew? Our people have paid a heavy price to have it built and manned as quickly as it was. That ship was proof of our commitment and sense of solidarity, so therefore I'd argue we should be allowed to go and retrieve whatever's left of it. Oh, because your first expedition went so well, the archpriest remarked mockingly, to which the offended Enowaean huffed with righteous indignation. Wait, one of the two Adnian monarchs yelled. Whereas yesterday's doppelganger had already been promoted to evil clone and escorted out of the room, this third Hirunas seemed much more convincing in regards to their looks as well as age, although they still appeared to be a few years older than the original. Perhaps we don't need to resort to violence just yet. Perhaps we can study them and make videos and air 'em, watch later, and learn from them. The third Hirunas mumbled and stuttered while rapidly losing confidence as the various council members were regarding the fake king with puzzled, judgmental expressions, seemingly staring a hole straight through their soul, or at least that must have been what it felt like. Psst, sis, what are you doing? Does this have anything to do with those weird forums Dad caught you browsing the other day? Shush. Mom said it would be my turn to be king today. The disguised sister chastised her younger brother. Look, I know what I'm doing. Just wait and stay quiet, okay? Or just leave. I know what I'm doing, I promise. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me that while the Adnian as well as the Enowaean representative might not agree with the spirit of my suggestion, I do believe that our interests align in such a way where neither party would be inconvenienced by a cooperative venture. Ediyun pondered aloud while absent-mindedly fidgeting with one of his many rings. Ah, shit. This is what I'd feared. To Atleon's horror, it seemed that factions were forming within the council. That fool, Ediyun, what's he doing? Can't he see that now more than ever we should be united? Atleon thought to himself. I suppose, as usual, it falls on me to compromise and help mediate the situation in order to maintain the council's cohesion. In that case, Altion began, seeing as you're all so excited to venture out towards GA-14 yet again, how about this? Every race gets to prepare up to 3 vessels, one of which a PKV, and together as one fleet they'll make their way to the Dark Goddess's domain to secure their respective races' interests, whatever those may be. Now, if the Gaians do show up, or are suspected of being close by, it's up to each race to individually decide whether they'd like to flee or take military action. And last, but not least, if anything goes wrong, we cut our losses and wash our hands of the situation. We can't let ourselves get suckered into wasting vast amounts of resources and manpower just to save rescue parties that were meant to save previous rescue parties. It's settled, then, Edion cheerfully exclaimed as everyone appeared to accept Atleon's plan. I don't know about you lot, but I'm excited to see where all of this will lead. Wait, if we're so scared of the Gaians finding us, then why don't we just have our ships explore their system at night, when it's dark outside? The real first Hirunas said, to which Atleon asked one of his attendants to fetch a copy of the Atnian Rules of Succession. You know, just in case. Hold the door like your life depends on it, 'cause it just might. Over at the bridge, the frightened captain and part of his crew were frantically trying to keep the Gaians at bay. They'd barricaded the door with every significantly large piece of machinery that wasn't nailed down, even though they knew it was just a matter of time before the Gaians would breach their defenses and do God knows what to them. It didn't matter what the security feed had shown them. These Gaians sounded much scarier and more feral in person. They roared and screamed loudly, and with each push, the Enowayans could feel the door as well as the items in front of it shake violently. Their arms were slowly faltering. They wouldn't be able to keep this up for much longer. Gods, what was I thinking? I'm so gonna die. These things are gonna tear me up. Galeth's train of thought stopped dead in its tracks. His stomach dropped. He couldn't breathe, and it suddenly felt as if liquid nitrogen was coursing through his veins. He heard something move above them. He was sure of it. Something was trying to get in via an alternative route, and it was fast. That was it. Galeth wanted to leave, to go back to his home, back to his mom. Considering their current predicament, a sentiment no doubt shared by the captain and the rest of the crew. After all, word around the ship was Galeth's mom was a fine lady and an even finer interior decorator. Son, if you don't start pushing again, I'm gonna have to start pushing my And then the captain froze as well. They'd all heard it now. A loud growl followed by almost equally loud, hollow thumping noises that were moving towards them. As if on cue, they all looked at the security monitor, which showed that only 2 Gaians were still pushing against the door, while the third was missing. Not for long, though, as upon following the continued rumbling sound emanating from above them, their eyes eventually came to a halt when said sounds brought attention to a rather large air vent overlooking the entire room. At which point anyone with a keen interest in spaceship air circulation protocols must have realized that a light shimmer emanating from a predator's steely gaze and a mouth full of sharp white teeth were never part of that particular vent's initial design. Contractors can be really difficult about that sort of thing after all. They're in the walls! Fucking run!